Well, thanks for the kind introduction, Sarah, and thanks for providing such inspiring, thoughtful comments to start off with, because this is precisely what we're looking at this venue as my slides are getting pulled up. So we're hosting this workshop basically to bring together folks interested in the intersection of different disciplines and industry and policymaking. So, and by the way, if you're interested in hearing our remarks even more loudly, I was informed that there is a kind of a headphone that you can attach to your ear, and then you can select channel 0. Of course, in a good computer science habit, it apparently starts with 0. And if you hit channel 0, then you'll get a fuller broadcast of what I'm saying. You can probably also tune into, well, the booths are empty, so the Russian translation is unfortunately not available. So then we can get started with the a few introductory remarks on my side. First of all, I just want to say that it's absolutely fantastic to look into the room and to see so many people that we've been in touch with for so long, really, moving up to this event, being here finally, having made it through the doors of ITU, through the labyrinth of the hallways up until this room, and to seeing so many other people online. It's really a pleasure to have all of you here. And I'm really looking forward to what promises to be a most exciting workshop. And I think it's also quite timely, because obviously I'm not telling you anything new if I say that AI and generative AI more precisely is probably one of the 3 top topics occupying the best minds in the world today. So what we're up to right now is to really foster this interdisciplinary but also pragmatically oriented debate to move things forward and to actually get things right when it comes to AI ethics and AI regulation. Because make no mistake, I think if we don't get this right, our societies will suffer enormously. This is really about the future of the prosperity of our economies, and it's about the future of the cohesion of our societies. And this is why this has such tremendous potential, but also such tremendous opportunities and risks involved. So that's the first thing that I want to highlight. It is a bit of an overview that I will give you, kind of a meta discourse or some ideas for structuring the difficult and heterogeneous landscape that we're seeing emerging in academia, but also in the policy discourse. And first of all, if this continues with the clicker, then I can say that it is, of course, a naturally interdisciplinary endeavor. So we need to look at both the risks and opportunities from different perspectives. And I'm saying this because I'm talking to different communities all the time. And in the law, and I know that there's lots of lawyers in the room and even some law professors, we tend to have kind of a tendency, of course, to look at the risks more than the opportunities, because naturally that is what we're regulating. It's a little tough and often unnecessary to regulate for opportunities, although that's possible as well. Think of IP law. But I think in the law, sometimes we have to look a little further to the opportunities, while some of the other disciplines, such as computer science, economics, industry, tend to focus on the opportunities, of course, and probably somewhere in the middle ground, as already back in the good Aristotelian days, we will find the way forward. So this is part of what we're trying to do here, and this is all the more important because, as all of you probably know, the trilogue has started on the EU AI Act, really the first, I can say at least, regulation for a large block that is moving forward to regulate AI. We will see most likely a result, a final version toward Christmas. It will be published then. The idea is to publish as May, June 2024. In the official journal, and then in the next 1 to 4 years, depending on the specific paragraphs and articles, this will become applicable. But what is equally important, this is something that has been highlighted by Sarah also already, is to look for a more global approach, I think. And there has been work toward this in the G7. We have the G7 Hiroshima AI process, but I think there's no better place than this one at the United Nations to think about potentially moving forward a framework of a UN global compact for AI or something along the lines. We might see, something like this emerging in the future or not. Certainly, we would be here to facilitate discourse in this direction, and I will say a little bit more about this in my closing statement with the last slide. Now, moving to a little more substantive part, I want to keep it very abstract, though, as is my habit. I try to pull up some kind of a analytical framework, and maybe we can move the Bastian. Can we move the speaker things? Yeah, thank you. So basically, the idea being that in the top line, you see the different time horizons. Because my problem at the moment, when I look at this discussion, is that there are folks clamoring about existential risk. And then there are others saying, including me, well, let's not uniquely focus on existential risk. Let's look rather at the things that are right in front of our eyes. And others say, let's talk about the opportunities. And I think we have to disentangle this by looking at the time horizon from a short, medium, and long-term perspective, and then at the issues that are presenting themselves on the micro level, the meso level, or the macro level, both in a technical and from a legal and ethical perspective. So take the example of content moderation. Content moderation, I think, is one of the largest challenges we're facing in this, and I will have a slide on this, but just to give you an impression of what I mean, I think in the short term, we will need fast solutions for making sure that there is not even more fake news and hate speech automatically produced and put onto the web with the help of generative AI. And the medium meso level, then we can think more systematically about this framework and how the AI Act and the DSA, the Digital Services Act, for example, in the EU could fit together. We have an online safety bill in the UK that's in the making, and other acts around the world. And then on the macro level, of course, but even that on a short-term perspective, because I think it's urgent, we need to think about the effects that this technology will have, for better or worse, on our democracies and its discourse. So that's one example of how we can break this down, and of course there are many others that we could discuss and will discuss during this conference. I will content myself to some very short observations concerning these three areas that I've highlighted here. So the question basically is, how can we translate this more academic framework into some kind of policy channel? I'm doing a lot of policy work, and a lot of folks in the room are doing this too. And on both sides of the Atlantic, we have Dean Christian here, who works in the National AI Advisory Council. We will have an intervention right now by Miriam Vogel, who chairs this body that advises US President Biden. Lots of people here in the room are advising the EU Commission, the Parliament, and so on and so forth. I think when we look at short-term perspectives, really urgent things, and the micro level, as I said, we have evidence right now that there is a problem with fake news and hate speech, toxic content online. There will be more of this, not of the toxic content, but discussion of it in the talk by Sandra Wachter. I know her pretty well, so I know that she can be pretty toxic as well, but only if she wants to, of course, and only in a good way. She will talk about this and present some more questions and solutions for this. But particularly, I'm wondering whether we might have to fix content moderation really in a fast-track way. I've published about this just a little bit, and I think the EU Digital Services Act could be something to go forward, applying this, for example, more strictly to generative AI model providers. Then in the medium and meso level, I think one of the things that might pop up is the question of algorithmic fairness and inclusive content. And again, this is something that Sandra will touch upon. When I put in this prompt just a few days ago about nurse and doctor, I was wondering what might come up. This is DALL-E 2. It's, of course, a system that was generated, that was developed by OpenAI, and this is the picture that I got. And you can see that it's actually a man and a woman. But if you have any experience from the clinical context, and when I was fed up with my law studies, I actually worked at a clinic for twice for a month, and looking into some medical things. I fell actually unconscious twice, and therefore came back to the law. But bracketing this, so the idea is that the person who holds the sheet, that's usually the subordinate person, because she's doing the notes, right? So if you have a bit of knowledge, it's most likely the woman who's the nurse and the man who's the doctor, although it's a little bit more subtle in this picture. And of course, you would need more experimentation to actually find out whether this indeed holds up, is a pattern or not. We've done this just a little bit with GPT-4 and language, and actually they seem to randomize between the two. So There is some work being done, of course, on the developer side, but the problem that I see is that we have a huge community that I'm also quite engaged with, and we've been developing some algorithms to reduce and mitigate discrimination in computer and in AI systems. There's a huge community based on algorithmic fairness. And that community specifically looks, for example, at scoring systems. Think credit scoring. You have a raw score, for example, of a medium-aged female African-American woman, and that score could be unfair. And then you can basically map this score to a fair score. And you could do this for many scores, and you find a fair distribution. And this is what a lot of these models do. Now, that is something where you can find a technical, I won't say solution, but at least some mitigation measures. But here, in this case, it's of course much more complicated. How do you design an inclusive picture, and what is that even? Speaking out language, there's so much concern, so much debate going on about what should be inclusive language. It's just very different from mapping one set of scores to another. And hence, I think, in the medium term, we really need much more exciting research going on both in computer science and in the law about what it means to have algorithmic fairness in place for generative AI systems. And my final remark here is going to be on the long-term perspective. And of course, I have to mention the question of existential risk, which has been at the forefront of several open letters that I have not signed. And the existential risk framework, I'm not going to dismiss it, because some people like Joshua Bengio, who's a brilliant person, you don't get the Turing Award for nothing. He's written up very cleverly a long story about how rogue AI could arise. And there's certainly a non-zero chance of really rogue AI arriving on our planet that wipes out a certain part of mankind. However, I would say that there is more important existential risks than the Terminator scenario. We have clear existential risk when it comes to climate change, and we should investigate more thoroughly, for example, the relationship between AI and climate change and the opportunities and risks that it presents. In fact, I have a recent paper out called Sustainable AI Regulation that looks into some of these matters. We have potentially, if anything, an existential threat to our democracies, not only due to AI, but fueled potentially by the kinds of phenomena we have addressed before concerning hate speech and fake news. And of course, I would say in the long run, and on the macro level, we certainly have a lot of disruption coming forward in terms of jobs, job quality, job types, job automation, certainly a good number of jobs that will be replaced by APIs. And we have Jeremias here, who is, I think, Europe's leading specialist on this, and who will give us more of an insight on this in just a few seconds. And at the same time, we will have to ask about the tax basis of the state. Where does the tax come from if the worker is replaced by an API? Where do the new jobs arise, and where is value creation then going to? Does it remain within that single state? Does it remain with the 7,000 workers who have been laid off in India, perhaps? Or do jobs go somewhere else? Those are the big questions we need to address now and urgently. It's never too early to think about existential Terminator risks either, but I don't think that policymakers should be captivated by looking at this with the same kind of urgency as climate change and other things such as jobs and taxes. All right, so those are just some things I wanted to highlight, kind of in a bit of a overview style, and we will hear much more on this in the next 2 days. However, this is only a 1.5-day workshop, and then we have the fantastic Global Summit on AI coming up that is equally here for 2 days, but of course we can't discuss all of the things that are on our minds and that are coming forward. So Sarah and I thought that it might be a good opportunity to actually launch a platform for discussing these things going forward, for hosting conferences and workshops like this. And we have somewhat humbly called it the International Expert Consortium on the Regulation, Economics, and Computer Science of AI. And we're launching this in the next few days, and we'll be co-leading this initiative to convene more of these types of workshops where we bring together leading scientists, policymakers, and industry leaders to think together hardly, but pragmatically and with a outcome-driven approach about the kind of challenges that our world is facing in the realm of AI. So this is what I think Sarah will talk about more also in her closing remarks. At this moment, I just want to limit myself to express another round of gratitude to those people and organizations who have made this meeting possible. First and foremost, the Dieter Schwarz Foundation. We have Marius Huber here with us. If you want to, you're going to raise your arm. If not, not. Thanks so much. He's from the Dieter Schwarz Foundation for supporting this meeting at such short notice with such generosity. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to fly all these people in from the US and from other places far and near. And I should say that the Dieter Schwarz Foundation has actually become a key player in funding crucial research on AI, not only in Germany, but also at the Oxford Internet Institute, at Stanford, some of the places that are well represented here in this conference as well. And then, of course, our teams on the ground at ENS and my place, at Wharton, Sarah's fabulous staff, and at ITU here who are supporting us all the way and who've been bombarded by emails from us. So thanks a lot for making all of this happening. Thanks a lot for making this possible. And I'm now looking forward to a really enjoyable, insightful, and I think really mind-blowing conference and fantastic speakers, that's for sure, in the next 1.5 days. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for coming, and enjoy the show.